My name is Peggy Boyle, and I would love to share a wonderful book with you today. It's about a wonderful scientist that I had not heard of until I read this book. And this is what the cover looks like. And it is Benjamin Banneker, Pioneering Scientist, and it was written by Ginger Wadsworth. In Maryland in 1737, Benjamin Banneker was working on his family's tobacco farm. It was hard work for a 6-year-old boy. The sun baked his back as he cut weeds with his hoe. He picked bugs off the big flat leaves. Sometimes he counted the bugs just before he squished them. He counted all the rows of tobacco on the farm. He even counted logs in the cabin he shared with his parents and 3 sisters. Counting made the lonely work a little more fun. At supper, Benjamin listened to stories about his family. Benjamin's grandmother was white. She had been a servant long ago. She worked for many years without pay. Benjamin's grandfather was black. In Africa, he had been the son of a king. In America, he had been a slave. Benjamin's father had been a slave too, but no one in Benjamin's family was a slave anymore. Their owners had set them free. Now the Bannekers owned this farm. Benjamin and his family were lucky because most Black men, women, and children in America were slaves. They did not own anything. After supper, Benjamin sat with grandmother Molly in her cabin. A fire heated the little house. Candles lit the room. Grandmother Molly opened her Bible. It was the only book she owned. Grandmother was teaching Benjamin to read. Benjamin was a fast learner. Everyone in the family was proud of him. He could read and write, and he was especially good at doing math problems. After Grandmother Molly had taught Benjamin everything she could, she sent him to school. Benjamin had never seen so many books. Most of the students at school had white skin, like Grandmother Molly. Everyone sat on benches and listened to the teacher. Sometimes they did math problems. Sometimes they read from books. The teacher even let Benjamin take some books home. Benjamin worked hard and he learned a lot. After school, he did chores. Then, if he was not too sleepy, he could read his school books. At night, Benjamin lay on his bed and looked out the window. Stars sparkled in the inky black sky. Some were brighter than the others, and Benjamin wondered why. Some groups of stars looked like animals or shapes. Sometimes a star seemed to shoot across the sky, and Benjamin wondered why. The clockmaker. After only 4 years of school, Benjamin had to quit. He was young and strong. His family needed him to work on the farm full time. But school had made Benjamin hungry to learn. He still kept his eyes on the sky. Sometimes he did hard math problems in the dirt. He used a stick instead of a pencil. At night, Benjamin read books by candlelight. Like most farmers, Benjamin told time by watching the position of the sun, but sometimes the sun was hidden behind trees or clouds. Clocks had been around for a long time, but in the 1750s, only rich people had clocks. Benjamin decided to make his own. When he was 20 years old, Benjamin borrowed a friend's pocket watch. He took it apart and studied each tiny piece. How did the thin hands go around and around, ticking off each minute? He drew a sketch of each piece. Then he carved new parts out of wood. He worked on his clock through the winter and summer. After 2 years of carving wood, Benjamin put the pieces together that he had made. His new clock worked. A bell rang once an hour. Benjamin no longer needed to look at the sky to tell time. His clock did the job. Lots of people came to see Benjamin's clock. They wanted to meet the clockmaker too. When Benjamin was 27 years old, the lonely farm life got even lonelier. His father died. His sisters had married and moved away, and grandmother Molly had died. Only Benjamin and his mother were left to do all of the farm work. There was so much to do. Benjamin had little time for studying. Sometimes he stayed up late and read his math books. Some nights he played his flute or violin and thought about his father. Benjamin began to make friends with other farmers who lived nearby. Many could not read or write. They didn't know much about math either. Benjamin showed his new friends how to weigh their tobacco crop. He helped them figure out how much it was worth. He also helped them write letters. Benjamin often met other farmers at a nearby store. They read the newspapers there and talked about the tough questions of farming. Was it time to plow? Was it going to snow again? Was it too early to plant seeds? Maybe someday Benjamin could help his friends with these questions too. Revolution, 1775. After Benjamin's mother died, he had to run the whole farm by himself. It was harder than ever to find any time to study. At least he had friends at the store to keep him company. Important news gave Benjamin and his friends a lot to talk about. Maryland was one of the 13 American colonies ruled by Great Britain. Many Americans thought the colony should be free to rule themselves. They did not like paying taxes to the British king. In April, British soldiers attacked Americans in Massachusetts. The Americans quickly formed an army. George Washington was their leader. Soldiers marched up and down the roads near Benjamin's farm. A war had begun. After many battles, the colonies won the Revolutionary War in 1783. A new country was born. George Washington became the first president of the United States of America. During the war, Benjamin kept farming and studying. He had also begun learning a new skill. His friend, George Ellicott, was a surveyor. George measured land and made plans so new roads could be built. He taught Benjamin about surveying. As usual, Benjamin wanted to learn more and more. George also taught Benjamin about astronomy. Astronomy is the science of studying the sun, moon, stars, and planets. George even had a telescope. Benjamin was always wondering about the stars. Now he learned that the brightest stars were not stars at all. They were distant planets. Benjamin studied George's astronomy books. He learned how to follow the positions of the planets. With this information, Benjamin could tell what the weather would be like next year. His new knowledge also made him a better surveyor. There was so much to learn. Sometimes Benjamin stayed up studying all night. He thought about his farmer friends. Benjamin thought he could help them with their farming questions. He wanted to write an almanac. In the 1700s, almanacs were important books. New ones came out every year. They gave people information for every day in the year. Almanacs had calendars and dates for planting and harvesting. They also told what the weather would be like the next year. Some almanacs had poems, stories, recipes, and news. Benjamin dipped his pen into the ink bottle over and over again. Piles of paper covered his table. On some, he had written math problems. Some had notes about the sky and the weather. When the rooster crowed, Benjamin put away his work, and it was time to milk the cows. In 1790, President Washington chose a site to build America's capital city. This area was called the District of Columbia. It was only a few hours away from Benjamin's farm. The president needed surveyors to plan the streets. The top surveyor on the job was Andrew Ellicott, George's cousin. Andrew knew that Benjamin was very good at surveying and astronomy. He asked Benjamin to help him. Helping to survey the Capitol was a great honor for Benjamin. Very few Black people in the 1790s got a chance to do such important work, and it was fun too. Benjamin loved using Andrew's excellent surveying tools. Benjamin worked during the cold, damp winter nights. Sometimes he slept only a few hours in his tent. After 3 months, the work and the weather were wearing Benjamin down. He was almost 60 years old. He loved his job, but he was ready to go home. It was time to finish his almanac. Almanac writer, 1791. At home, Benjamin wrote and wrote. When he stopped, it was only to sharpen his pen tip with his knife. He checked his math many times. Sometimes he forgot to do the farm chores. It took Benjamin 4 months to write an almanac for the year 1792. His book was packed with information that people needed, especially farmers. Benjamin made 4 copies of his almanac in his best penmanship. He sent 1 copy to Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson was the Secretary of State of the United States. He was also a farmer like Benjamin. Like many white farmers, Jefferson owned slaves. Benjamin sent a long letter to Jefferson, along with the almanac. He wrote that slavery was cruel. Black people deserved to be treated the same as white people. He argued that no one should own slaves, not even important American leaders. A few weeks later, Benjamin received a letter from Jefferson. Jefferson thanked Benjamin for his almanac. He said he hoped things would improve in the future for Black people. But Jefferson did not free his slaves. A book publisher wanted to print and sell Benjamin's almanac. It was the first published almanac written by a Black person. Printed on the cover were the words, Benjamin Banneker's Almanac. The publisher sold many copies, and Benjamin became famous. People wrote him letters thanking him for the helpful information. They came to his cabin to meet him, just as they had when he had built the clock. Benjamin stayed busy. He had to write an almanac for 1793, and he wrote one for the next year too. He wrote a new almanac every year for 6 years. When Benjamin was too old to run the farm, he sold his land. He stayed on in the little cabin where he had grown up. He still worked on math problems, and he still read books. He still played his violin or flute when the sun went down. At night, he wrapped himself in a cloak and went outside to look at the stars. Benjamin Banneker never stopped wondering why.